Okay, so I want to talk about what's possibly the greatest ever guitar tone ever created, or at least my favourite anyway. That is the Beano tone. What is the Beano tone? If you don't know, the Beano tone is a name that is affectionately given to a recording by John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, of which Eric Clapton played the guitar. Around 1965 they recorded this album, and on the front of it Eric Clapton is reading a Beano magazine, so it gets called the Beano album. Now the tone is very, very influential in guitar. It's probably one of the first recordings of a really loud Marshall with a Gibson into it, and it really defined an era and has defined basically electric guitar ever since. There are lots of influential tones, but this is a real big one, and I've taken on the adventure of trying to recreate this because it is one of my favourite tones, and I think that when we recreate tones then we kind of share our love and our passion for them. But anyway, I'm not going to get too carried away with how much I love this guitar sound. It's probably my favourite. So what is the Beano tone? The tone really is made up of three things. It is Eric Clapton, it is the gear he used, which was a Gibson Les Paul and a Marshall JTM 45, which is a 45 watt amplifier turned up to the max, no reverb on this thing, and it had 2 by 12 inch speakers, Celestian speakers in it. The amplifier was a KT66 power amp. Now that in itself will sound great, and that will be a beautiful sound, but that's not the Beano tone. The Beano tone is Clapton into his gear and then how it was recorded, because I think that's where it really made a difference. If you bring up a modeler or something and you bring up like a classic Plexi sound or a JTM 45, it's going to sound good, but it's probably not going to sound like the Beano album. To say the Beano album is made up of the three things: Clapton, his gear, and then how it was recorded in Decca Studios. There's a guy called Mike Vernon. He was the staff director at Decca Studios, and he's written quite a lot about what was happening at that time and what they did to record it. One thing which is quite famously written about the guitar tone is that it was so loud. It was really, really loud. The engineers were having big problems with how to record this thing. Interestingly, Jimmy Page was one of the sound engineers who was there, and he was like, nah, I know how to record this. This is going to be fine. Jimmy Page knows a thing or two about loud guitars, yeah? But there was a cafeteria that was next to Decca Studios. The guitar was bleeding into there. They could hear it there. People could hear it on the street. It was crazy loud. They've never recorded anything like this in these studios. They just didn't know what to do. So Mike Vernon talks about one of the things that they did to try and control the sound of this was they turned the amplifier towards the wall. They had it facing towards where the sound desk was, those little windows in the recording rooms. It was kind of facing in that direction, and it was turned away from the band and towards the wall. They put a piano cover over the whole amplifier to try and muffle or deaden some of the sound that came from it. Now it's this thing which I think is quite important, okay? What I think is happening here is that if they've turned the amplifier to the wall and they're miking it at a distance, they said they mic'd it at about 3 foot to 1 meter away, but the amplifier was turned to the wall. I'm thinking if it was quite close to the wall, then they wouldn't have had the distance to put the microphone a meter away from it. So I'm thinking maybe it was mic'd up from the rear. Now I know that sounds quite controversial. If they mic'd it up from the rear, then the amplifier could be quite close to the wall. And also, when I think of what the Beano tone sounds like, it sounds quite nasal, it sounds quite woolly and warm, but it also sounds quite biting and quite harsh in a good way. But there's something which is missing from it. And I think the thing that's missing is the initial attack of the note. And that could be for a couple of reasons, okay? It's a valve amplifier and it's turned up to the max. So it's going to be compressing. It's going to be naturally compressing, which is going to diminish that just initial attack of it. But I think that with the piano covering over the amplifier and the potential that I think that it was mic'd up from the rear, it's also going to just lose the initial attack of that note. The other thing we have to consider as well is that the room mic was picking up the guitar in absolutely everything that was going on. It was in the vocals, it was in the drums. They had to redo some of the vocals because the guitar was so loud in them. So that's a factor in what we hear. So when we hear the Beano tone, it's more than just Eric into his guitar amplifier. That is what he would have heard. That's what the band would have heard when they're in there. But what we hear is the mic'd up and the recorded sound of that guitar, also run through some reverb in Decca Studios as well. When you combine all that, we get the Beano tone, and it is a glorious, glorious tone. So the gear that I'm going to use to do this is a Gibson Les Paul. I'm going to run into a Boss Nextone amplifier. Now, I normally play Black Star amps, but I've been playing with this Nextone for a few weeks now, and it is just so good, so fun to play with. I'm also going to be using a 2-notes Cab M Plus, and that is going to be giving us the microphone, the cabinet, and the room and the reverb simulation to try and get close to something that they were doing in Decca Studios. So I only have the one microphone at the moment, okay? And it is a Condenser 87, and I'm going to put it at the front. So this is out in front of the cabinet, and it's about 3 foot back, and it sounds like this. That doesn't sound too much like the Beano record. I'm going to move that to the rear. See, this is where I think it may actually have been sitting anyway. So the same cabinet, it's that 2x12 British Marshall sort of style cabinet, and this time with the microphone moved to the rear at about 3 foot back. That's sounding more like the Beano tone. That's beginning to sound a bit better. Okay, so despite them moving the amplifier towards the wall, facing it away from everybody else, they were still getting a lot of bleed in and around a lot of the instruments. So there's still an element of it being picked up in the room. And remember, the Beano tone that we're looking for is not just the sound of the amplifier. Yeah, what we hear is the recorded sound of the band and the recorded sound of the guitar. So we need to try and bring in this room mic as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in another condenser mic, and I'm going to place it as far away as I can from the amplifier. If I turn the other microphone off, so this is just the room mic, and let's see what this sounds like. That's sounding good. But it still sounds quite distant because that's the room mic. So I'm going to add in that other microphone. So this is the microphone placed at the back of the amplifier and the room mic combined. One more element we need to add into this, and that is the reverb. So there's no reverb on Eric Clapton's amplifier, but the studio has some reverb. So what I've done is I've had the reverb on all the time, but I'm going to turn it off. This might give us some indication as to what it actually sounded like in the room when they were recording things. Sounds pretty cool. Actually sounds quite nice, and I'm somebody who really needs reverb when I play, but this has no reverb at all. No reverb on the amp, and the 2 notes has turned off the reverb simulation. I'm going to put that reverb back on. Just out of interest, what I'm going to do is that at the microphone that I have on the amplifier, I'm going to turn that so that it's at the front to see whether or not that makes a difference. So this is that microphone on the amplifier now round to the front of it. That doesn't sound a million miles away, but again, it's that attack. It's the initial entry that the note has, which is just completely changed by a front-facing microphone. For me, that sounds too immediate. Like, the sound is quite aggressive and it's quite harsh that Clapton is having on the record, but it's the front end of that note which is just slightly kind of controlled. And for me, they've done that by having the microphone at the back. That's what I think. So that's it at the back. So there's something quite cool that we can look at as well. So there was 2 tracks, Lonely Years and Bernard Jenkins. I believe that they were recorded before the rest of the album, and it was just Eric Clapton and John Mayall that recorded them. And they were recorded just on one old microphone that they had knocking around. So I'm going to see if I can recreate that just using the sound I've got now, but I'm going to turn off the microphone that is actually on the amplifier. So the only microphone we're hearing now is the one that is the room microphone. So Eric and John were very close together when they were recording this, but say the amplifier was probably as far away as they could get it in the studio. So this is just the room mic, and let's see if we can get some of the tones that we hear, say, on Bernard Jenkins or Lonely Years. I think that's pretty close to the Beano Jenkins tone, which is really cool because it can sound really distant and quite muted, but then it can sound quite upfront and harsh. And again, it's just with the pickup switch that. So a little bit of a recap there, okay? And the cabinet is a 2x12 kind of Marshall or British style cabinet, and we have one microphone at the rear of the amplifier about 3 foot back, and we have another microphone, a room mic, which is as far away as it will go from the amplifier. Combine the 2 of them together, add a little plate reverb, and I think we have the Beano tone. So there are many people online who have given great explanations as to what was happening around Eric Clapton and John Mayall and Decca Studios at that time. Keith from 5 Watt World has done a couple, I think, of really, really good sort of histories of the Beano tone. So I'm not going to go into that too much. I'm just sort of going to go into this kind of thing where I see myself as a bit of an adventurer in tone and trying to find some of these beautiful guitar tones that we like, and in researching the Beano tone and forever trying to find closer ways to sound like that, I think I came across a little nugget, and I want to add my little sort of piece of, I don't know, my little discovery or my little piece of advice or whatever I want to call it into the lore and the never-ending journey of trying to find the Beano tone, and that is to do with the microphone and the microphone placement. I think I'm on to something. So what do you think? Do you think that I came quite close to the Beano tone? I think I did. I think I'm pretty close to it, and for me that microphone placement is what did it. As you heard, if I put that microphone to the front of the amplifier, then it just didn't sound as good, but when I moved it at the back, it sounded good. Now that could be down to many things, okay? It could be down to the models and the room simulation that my 2Notes is using, but I'm sticking with it, okay? I think it was mic'd up from the rear. I think that's all. I think I'm on to something there, okay? Do you have any tone tips for trying to find the Beano tone? How do you think it was recorded, or what have you heard or kind of read about it? I'd really love to know. Say this is like a journey that I'm on, an adventure of always trying to find things that get me closer to classic guitar tones, and the Beano tone is just beautiful and I absolutely love it. And I think it's important to try and simulate some of these tones and to try and find out more about them, because when we do that, then we just discover more about the music that we love, yeah? And the usual social media stuff, give me a like, give me a subscribe.